Welcome to What's the Matter, the pod and video cast where we talk about anything and everything with a psychology twist. Our content isn't going to be super heavy and technical, but my dad and I want to provide you with useful conversation that's going to help improve your thinking. If you want to stay up to date with everything we're going to be talking about, then remember to like and subscribe. Thanks guys, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of What's the Matter. So I am joined by my glamorous co-host, this never gets old, Mr. Dad.
I was going to say morning. Is it morning?
It
is morning.
Kind of. For another 20 minutes it is. Yeah.
Good day. Good day to you.
Good day to you, sir. How's Tricks?
Yeah, good actually. Yeah, really good.
Sun
shining today. Not that that's the only measure, but the sun's shining. Yeah. Golf's going reasonably well.
Yeah, I was waiting for that.
Lots of great client stuff going on at the minute, and really enjoying these podcasts with you.
Yeah, well, at least one of us is. No, just kidding. I'm enjoying them too. So this is actually the final episode of our mini-series, 3-part mini-series, which we've been doing on self-confidence, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just to kind of recap to all the lovely listeners out there, in the first episode we covered self-confidence. What is it? How our beliefs affect this. So we talked through three ways we form beliefs, and we kind of went on to the importance of journaling and celebrating our achievements, sort of how that can contribute to an increased self-belief. The last episode, so part 2, we talked about self-talk, the inner voice. How do we talk about ourselves? The 3 ways in which we talk about ourselves, or sort of self-talk. And then we kind of went on to the importance of affirmations and adding these to our life, which, I think everyone seemed to take those quite well so far. So what we're going to be talking to you guys about today is another key contributor to ways in which you can increase your self-confidence, which is visualization. So often referred to these days as mental simulation. So really how we see ourselves. But you know what I'm going to do here. I'm going to hand it to you to give a jazzy description of what is mental simulation.
Yeah, thanks, Em. Not so much a definition on this episode, just a little bit of a brief explanation. I think visualization as a term is one that most people get. But in more recent years, certainly myself and our team and in our area of performance, what was referred to as visualization more and more gets referred to as mental simulation. And key reason for that is the very nature of the term visualization sort of intimates you are seeing something. And it is, that is what we're doing. We're imagining ourselves one way, shape or form, or imagining a scenario. But it isn't just about what we see. And we'll talk about this more in this podcast, but actually it's really important, not just what we see when we're mentally simulating, but, what are we hearing? Yeah. What might we be feeling? And in some respects, what might we be even smelling or tasting based on certain things we might mentally simulate. So we will use the word visualization probably here and there, but we're probably using more the term mental simulation. Yeah. I think it encompasses more of the 5 senses which are important when we are doing this.
If you actually think about, I know this is definitely not quite the same thing, but those simulation rides that you get, where you could be, I don't know where you might be,
Disney or somewhere.
Or anywhere. Yeah, I went on a very questionable one in Tunisia once. Yeah, but let's go for a legitimate one in Disneyland. You won't have even left your seat. You won't have moved anywhere, but you could feel like you've been upside down. You've had water sprayed at you. They add smells into the experience.
You might have been into space. Thought you were in space, whatever, on a rocket or something. Yeah, all those sorts of things.
And that's almost how our brains work in this sense when we think about scenarios. If we're doing it properly, and we're going to kind of talk about consciously simulating experiences for ourselves that are positive, but the more that we add for those 5 senses, obviously, the more it kind of ingrained in our mind. Is that correct?
Well, the more real it seems, the more so today we've talked about a number of things that contribute to belief and confidence, but today a real key component is really, as you said, how we see ourselves. And what does that really mean? It's really when we are visualizing, or the phrase we're going to use is mentally simulating ourselves doing things, being things, experiencing things, succeeding or failing, things going well, things not going well, it's amazing. On any average day, all of us mentally simulate without necessarily always realizing that we're doing it.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say to you, so just, probably in your experience of kind of how long you've been doing this for, how many, or what sort of examples you can even think of on a day-to-day basis where people might be not consciously doing this, but realizing they've almost put themselves in quite a negative.
Yeah, well, people typically on a daily basis, they'll be mentally simulating all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Examples are, I've had clients who are mentally simulating a really important presentation that they need to do in 2 weeks' time, and they keep replaying it over and over and over again about how it's going to go, and often not very positively. It's often without realizing they're doing it, they are mentally simulating failure over and over and over again, and the things that are going to go wrong and how embarrassing it's going to be, and they're going to say the wrong thing, or they're going to forget what the words they need to be saying, or there's going to be a dull tumbleweed moment when they tell a joke, and it's going to be embarrassed. So they'll over and over and over again, they'll play that reel, if that makes sense. That little movie, let's use the movie connotation, they'll play that movie over and over again, mentally simulating that presentation, that it's going to go wrong and it's going to go terribly. Now, of course, that doesn't guarantee it's going to go wrong, but it makes it highly likely.
Yeah.
And we'll explain something really important in a short while about the subconscious and central nervous system, how it reacts and responds to these mental simulations. So it could be a presentation that someone rehearses over and over again or mentally simulates. It could be a party or a social function that they're going to go to at the weekend. It could be a really important meeting. It could be a sales meeting that they've got coming up in 3 days' time with a really important client. There's a lot riding on it. It could be absolutely anything. It could be a holiday. Mm-hmm. Often sometimes we book holidays, and long before you go on the holiday, you imagine what it's going to be like. You might even be imagining from the pictures in the brochure or what's on the website, what the beach looks like, what your property or accommodation looks like. You start to imagine some of the social events on that holiday with your friends or family that you've gone with, and you'll be doing that in a positive, constructive way, or we might well be doing that in a less than positive, quite destructive way. You could be doing that in a way that represents success for you, or it could be doing that in a way which represents failure for you. We are all mentally simulating every day, often without realizing that we're doing it.
Yeah, we were talking just before we came on here, weren't we, about I was saying to you, there was an old one-to-one client I'd have, and when my first ever session with her, so really way before we sort of dived into all things mind span and mindset, she was saying that for quite a few months she's been really apprehensive about going on a hen do. That was still months away, but she knew she was going to have to travel in a car with people she didn't know, and might be in an hour and a half drive, and she'd been imagining this car journey over and over and over again. I don't want them to think I'm boring. What if I'm boring? What if I can't think of anything to say? So what she's done is over and over again imagine having nothing to say and living that awkward moment, like you say, tumbleweed moment. Thankfully, I was having sessions with her before it ever got to that, and shifted her focus before she ever went in there. Instead, imagining about having a real laugh on the journey, or being fun, or thinking about obviously you've kind of just explained this well, but the more we put ourselves in those places, positively or negatively, doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen, but that's what we're mentally preparing ourselves for.
Yeah, and it's more likely to happen.
Yeah,
it's actually much more likely to happen. And one of the key reasons for that is, as you and I know, because we discuss this quite a lot in some of the work we do with our clients, is the subconscious and central nervous system basically cannot differentiate. It can't tell the difference between an event or experience that we really have and an event or experience that we imagine or vividly imagine having, or mentally simulate, for another word, is another phrase. So the more we imagine something going wrong, at the time that you're imagining it or mentally simulating it, no wonder you don't feel very good.
Yeah.
No wonder you actually start to create your subconscious and central nervous system starts to invoke the emotions that you would be having if you were really at that event and it was really going that way.
Yeah.
So if that's failure, so for that client of yours who kept imagining that hen do car journey, every time she did that, she probably felt pretty awful while she was doing it.
Yeah. You actually fit the physiological state of your body changes as well. Because if if in that example where she was getting quite, thinking about how awkward that would be, that she started feeling anxious. Sorry, I'm getting a tight chest as I describe having a tight chest. See the power of our minds.
Indeed.
Yeah, she'd get a really tight chest, clammy hands, start feeling really stressed, which I'm not saying this will always happen, but that actually affected her working day as well, because that's sort of where her head would go when she's on the train to work in an anxious, stressed state, and then you're not really that well prepared for the day because you put yourself in a bad place, and people don't realise that thinking can be so harmful and does affect more than just that moment. But it's like is it in Stop Thinking, Start Living when they talk about sleep, that the Richard Carlson book, and he sort of talks around, this is always a good way for me, I think, thinking about how our brain, the subconscious, can't differentiate between something true or real, what experiences around when you sleep and you're having a nightmare or a horrendous dream and you wake up and you are sweaty and you do feel horrendous, but the difference there is your mind goes, that wasn't real, so that was just a dream, and then it's like, okay, that's fine. Whereas we don't seem to have that change when we're thinking about these mental simulations.
No. And the fascinating thing about the dream example, Em, is it's whilst you're asleep, in simple terms, you could say your conscious mind has gone to sleep. Your subconscious is still active. There's still stuff happening in your brain when you're sleeping, and sometimes within our subconscious we'll be having a dream whilst we're asleep, and it could be a pleasant dream or it could be a nightmare or something horrible. And people know, when we've all experienced this, when you wake up after an awful dream, it could be in the night you wake up or in the morning when you wake up, for a few seconds, because your conscious mind is just waking up, for a few seconds it feels like the dream were real, until your conscious mind after a few seconds decides, it wasn't real, it was a dream. And then the emotions and the physiological aspect of that dream start to subside quite quickly. But again, I agree with what you're saying around, so we sort of know that about dreams, but actually we'll be imagining all sorts of stuff happening every single day, constructively or destructively, and we don't realize that actually whatever we're imagining or mentally simulating, you then start to feel it, because your subconscious can't tell the difference between something that really happens and something that you imagine happening. So we know, certainly in a sporting context, and I've worked hugely with professional footballers and other athletes at the professional level around mental simulation, getting them to rehearse things going well, them doing what they want to be doing in a game or in a tournament. And that can be both how they want to be thinking, their mindset. It could be how they want to be feeling at certain times, what they want to do on the pitch or the court or whatever. And it's sort of accepted in sport that actually visualization or mental simulation is a key part of mental rehearsal and practice. But exactly the same thing applies to us in our lives. We are all rehearsing and practicing without knowing that we're doing it. An event coming up, something important. It's no secret, I'm massively big into my golf again now.
What? Oh my goodness, I had no idea.
I know, it might be a surprise, but I got massively into my golf again now. And, I spend time off the course mentally simulating I'm really trying to get into a groove with my swing. And obviously that's a physical thing, but as I'm doing as much mental rehearsal of that or mental simulation as I am actually on the driving range or even on the course. Does that mean I'm a world beater and world number one yet? Of course not. I'm realistic about that stuff, but I want to just be playing golf to the best that I can play the game, if that makes sense. And my mental rehearsal is as important as my physical rehearsal. And it's the same for all of us, whether you're in a sporting context or any other context. It's really important we do this more positively, consciously, because the consequences are significant. If I keep mentally rehearsing any aspect of myself or my life and I'm messing it up over and over again, or it's going badly, I'm actually creating neural pathways in my brain for that to actually be the case.
Definitely. And I could go really off topic here and go on to that mind sculpture book that we were talking about, but I don't want to make this podcast 90 minutes long. But
we've challenged ourselves
really
to keep it shorter, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. But it is very fascinating around. You can. There's just quickly. And there's like studies that have been done of people really strongly imagining themselves like playing, like tennis players playing tennis, imagining that they're playing tennis, and everything that would be going on in your brain when you're physically playing would be happening when you're just imagining it. And so the more you strengthen that part of your brain, as you say, with the neural pathways, the bigger that exists, the bigger the sort of, it's like a cycle really, isn't it? You're more likely to create that again and again. But anyway, I won't go really off on
Well,
on
actually, no,
that
to be
book.
honest, I think,
But it is a good book.
Yeah, the mind sculpture book that you're referring to. Are you thinking about that chapter, Pumping Iron in the Mental Gym? Is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah.
Well, why don't you just quickly make reference to that for the listeners, because it is relevant.
Yeah. Well, it's really fascinating. It's sort of talking about actually just there's a very interesting study they reference around people going to the gym and how the impact of actually visualizing yourself doing your workout before you go, like not just thinking in your head, yeah, I'm gonna do some squats and I'm gonna do this. Like actually, no, you're there, you're in the gym. Close your eyes, you're on the sofa, you're in the gym, you're loading the bar up with the weights, you're taking your deep breath, you're doing each rep. You actually create mental fatigue the same as you would in the gym, which I just found astonishing. Like, and you're not actually doing it, but not sorry, not only are you creating mental fatigue, but after, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks, there was a group of regular gym goers, regular bodybuilders who didn't do any mental simulation, and then there was another group who did, who added this in. So imagining their workouts, imagining their core sort of lifts, and after 3 weeks their strength had improved like 30% from positively visualizing themselves succeeding. They're obviously not in there imagining not lifting or not being able to do it, but the more that they are imagining that and visualizing, mentally simulating that, their neural pathways are getting bigger that are in charge of that, and they're strengthening, because we create neural pathways all the time. Our brain changes shape all the time. But if you only do that like that once, that shape that you've created in your head won't stay there. It goes. Whereas the more that we do something, we're sort of cementing that neural pathway in our head that it's just stronger basically.
Stronger or deeper is another word.
Deeper,
And then what's liable to happen is we will more automatically trigger that neural pathway in reality. So not only by visualizing it or mentally simulating it, are we strengthening them? That's one way of strengthening those neural pathways. When we're next in the gym doing that thing in reality, that part of the brain will be triggered in reality, if that makes sense. So if you've been rehearsing messing it up over and over again, that's what's likely to happen in reality. If you rehearse it, mentally simulate it successfully over and over again, that's more likely to be triggered when you're in the situation in reality. Whether that's a presentation, whether that's going to that party, whether that's being on holiday, whether that's at the gym, all this stuff we imagine doing or being at any time.
But you also feel more confident doing those things. I mean, just personal experience here. Obviously, I know your hobby is golf. Mine is, I'm really into fitness and heavy lifting. And lockdown, obviously, we've just had months and months of my regular day-to-day thing that I would do has been affected. So I haven't been able to go to the gym so much. Or yes, I have been doing stuff, but for 4 months, the thing that used to be second nature to me was I wasn't able to do that. And when I first went back to the gym, I was actually quite nervous, and I would talk myself out of it and say, look, no, come on, you've done this loads of times, it's absolutely fine. But I don't actually think, in hindsight, I think my confidence was actually affected going back. And even the way that I was working out was not going so well. I was, obviously I'd lost strength, but even the way that my form, as they say, was actually compromised on quite a few things. So like my boyfriend's a personal trainer, so he spent a fair bit of time with me correcting that, but I was still in my own head about it. However, I've started for the last 3 weeks really positively visualizing myself working out and doing those things that I was finding more difficult before I go. And I think you feel confident as a byproduct because you've mentally prepared yourself for it. But equally, maybe this is placebo from having read that book, but I really do feel stronger and I really do feel better from having almost worked out in my head before I've even got to the gym.
Well, the great thing is, when we mentally simulate successfully, so we're visualizing ourselves being successful or doing something well. Absolutely, that impacts your self-belief and confidence, because your subconscious and central nervous system thinks you're really doing it.
Yeah.
Because again, going back to that point a little while ago, it can't differentiate or tell the difference between something that you really experience and something that you imagine experiencing or doing. So therefore, the more I visualize or mentally simulate doing something successfully, or adopting a certain behavior or a trait, or delivering a great presentation or having a great round of golf, etc., my subconscious, which is huge, by the way, in comparison with the conscious, actually thinks I'm really doing it. It thinks I'm really there. It thinks I'm really swinging the golf club like that. So actually, when I get on the golf course, because even though I might not have played golf for a week, but actually, if I've played it every day in my mind, actually I get on the course and feel pretty good, because I think actually, because I feel like I've played well every day. There are just endless examples when you read around the subject of the massive impact of positively visualizing or mentally simulating all sorts of stuff. That the great book Man's Search for Meaning is all about the concentration camps and the horrific environments that people are in World War II. And by imagining a future beyond that, certain people managed to get through it. Amazingly so, and certain people didn't. So the way we mentally simulate or visualize on any average day can have huge consequences for us in our day-to-day lives, and our level of self-belief, our level of confidence, and how well we then conduct ourselves successfully or otherwise. So the little voice in your head we discussed last time, that's significant. So we need to make that positive and constructive. But it's not just the little voice; it's how you're mentally simulating or visualizing yourself on a regular basis.
Lies.
Yeah. So how we're talking to ourselves and how we see ourselves are crucial. So
sorry, I've got something I want to take to you now. So obviously we're talking about really conscious decisions you and I have made because we're very interested in this field around what we visualize. Now, a lot of people aren't like that, even though a lot of people do visualize every day. So what advice do you sort of have for people for getting into this positively, and also being aware when they're perhaps in a negative visualization? I don't know, what advice do you have for people to, because I think otherwise I was going to say me and you're going to just waffle on.
I'm sure it don't waffle on him, but what we always like to do is give people a takeaway, isn't there, around something they can go and do. Some will and some won't, obviously. There's a couple of key things for me that come from this being aware of visualization or mental simulation and its huge importance. One is, from today, I would encourage listeners to be more aware when you are mentally simulating negatively. And one of the ways you can start to be more aware is if you're not feeling great, or you're starting to feel anxious, or you're starting to feel nervous, or you're fed up, or whatever. All of that stuff will be coming from either negative self-talk, which we covered last time, or you're simulating certain things in your life negatively. You're imagining them negatively and destructively. That could be messing something up, or a horrible situation, or the difficulty you perceive in the future, whatever. And what we're not talking about is denying reality here. We're just talking about, getting more of a grip of your internal environment in your head and the consequences of that. So first thing I'd encourage is catch yourself, be more consciously aware, and be on the lookout for when you're mentally simulating or visualizing negatively. That's one thing to do, that catch yourself. And obviously what you want to try to do is then switch that around, to start to imagine whatever it is you are imagining, start to imagine that more positively, more constructively, or yourself being more successful, whether it's the presentation or big sales meeting or something, social event that's coming up, whatever. And you can actually take that a step further to really start to practice mental simulation more consciously, more regularly, and more positively and some of our clients do this, if you've got let's just say you have got a presentation coming up in the workplace as part of your job, and you don't do presentations very often. It's not something you're that used to. Public speaking and presentations is often quite high in people's fears, so that actually sometimes triggers them to rehearse them mentally negatively. But anyway, let's say you have got a presentation coming up in a few weeks' time. I would encourage you to get yourself your journal or a pad, paper and a pen, and just sit down and just write a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs or a few paragraphs of how you ideally would like the presentation to go. Describe yourself, describe how you're thinking as you walk in, describe yourself around how you're standing physically, how you're positioning yourself, your body language, the first few sentences that leave your lips as you open the presentation, what you're saying and how confidently you're saying it. And then you can sort of just go over some of the key aspects of the rest of the presentation about how good it feels, how good you feel doing it, how clearly you're getting your messages across, how you're breathing, what you can hear from the audience. You can see nods of agreement from the people you're presenting to. Just bring it to life. Write a few paragraphs, write a story, tell it like a story if you want to. But on paper, just capture what you want the whole thing as a story. And then what you can do is you can read that back over and over and over again and use that as a stimulus for yourself to mentally simulate it, and visualize it really positively over and over and over again. Some people I work with, some clients will actually record it.
Yeah.
They write it as a story, and then they'll read it and record it, and then play it to themselves through their headphones, if they're on a run or at the gym or out for a dog walk. But you can use that audio, or you can use the written version as a stimulus to visualize or mentally simulate it positively over and over and over again. Now, of course, if you do that, does that guarantee the presentation is going to go really well? Can't guarantee that, because there are some unknowns in there. But crikey, you'll be prepared. You'll have created the neural pathways in your brain for more likely making that outcome and that process a reality.
Yeah.
Because you are mentally rehearsed. You're taking the conscious time to mentally rehearse it really constructively. But not just once, as you said earlier, not just once, over and over and over again through repetition.
Yeah. And as you say, like, even the mood that you'd have going into that meeting room or wherever it is that you're going, you might have a moment of, well, this is a big deal, but then you're checking in with yourself again around, we've just talked about strengthening those neural pathways and deepening them, as we said. So you'll feel better going into that, even though it's not happened, but you've just, you're more prepared for something positive to come out of it. I think it's a huge thing that can really sort of positively impact people. And it's just, as you say, learning to check yourself when you're kind of, oh, is that helpful? Is that not helpful? Because you're right, we all do it on a day-to-day basis. I think even like a common thing I hear with people is after an argument, almost imagining the argument again and then thinking, oh,
again.
I said that. Oh, wouldn't it be good if I said that? And there's these things that have never been said, but you've imagined them all after it's happened. And we sort of, that's something I think people always can go off into a tangent on their day-to-day about, but no, I think.
Sorry, and interestingly there, you've just prompted something again. You do this a lot, don't you?
Sorry.
Not only, we've talked a little bit about mental rehearsal for future things.
Yeah.
Remember, people can spend, we all can spend time mentally simulating past events.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're enjoyable past events, but often they're not. We tend to mentally simulate and imagine all over again a horrible experience, a big argument that we had, as you just sort of referred to arguments, et cetera, et cetera. And again, remember, the more we imagine those things, the more we strengthen them. And sometimes there's stuff in the past that we don't want to deny and brush under a carpet. That's not what we're talking about. But you don't want to be living it every day, because it's only us keeping it alive by reimagining it or resimulating it again.
No, definitely.
So that's relevant as well. That's really relevant too.
I think that's quite a big thing with, obviously this is an awful thing to happen, but say somebody's marriage is broken down and they've been either been left or something really unfair has come out of it. And some people can stay in that place for quite a long time, even years afterwards. And that can stop them from getting into new things, or it can affect, we're kind of touching on different topics here, but it's, you're right. I didn't mean to go off into that tangent there, but
it's a good
past
tangent.
Simulation is it's always good to think about stuff. I'm not saying have an argument and then never think about it again, because we actually need to learn from stuff.
Yes.
And it might be, yeah, perhaps you reacted in a way once that you weren't proud of, but recognize that, learn and move on, rather than, oh, that didn't happen, I'm going to pretend that didn't happen and just block it out. So yeah, you're right, just not staying in that place. But hopefully what we've given people today has been useful. I know we've tried to keep this succinct. I actually don't know how long we've been talking for.
I'm not sure if we succeeded or not.
No, I'm not sure we did either. But time flies when you're having fun, hey?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so basically, recap our advice for people: check yourself if you're negatively visualizing or mentally simulating future or past experience. Constructively and positively imagine that, if it's a future event as well, imagine how you would like that to go, put yourself in that place and live in that moment. And yeah, ultimately you'll feel a lot better for that than not.
And to go back to another point you made, you will physically change your brain structure.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether you do it negatively or positively, or constructively or destructively, you are influencing your brain structure.
Yeah.
And for me, the way I sort of sometimes summarize this with it like a sentence is, if we're going to do this anyway, because we're all going to visualize from time to time or mentally simulate stuff, if we're going to do it anyway, we might as well be doing it in line with what success represents for us. Yeah. If you're going to do it anyway, do it to create success rather than do it to create failure.
No, definitely. It's 100%. Agree with you, honey. I'm with you.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of part 3 of our 3-part mini-series on self-confidence. Hopefully our listeners are feeling more confident, have stronger self-belief in themselves, and that will continue to improve for them over the next few weeks. You and I are going to be back again in another 2 weeks, aren't we? And I'm going to leak some information here. I think we're going to do our next episode on goal setting.
Yeah.
So who doesn't love that? Right.
Well, so, again, it's a big subject with lots of thoughts and principles in it. We're going to be talking about the merits of goal setting, but also not just any old goal setting. It's going through a process which is thorough and carefully considered, and that's all really important, rather than just setting some goals.
Yeah, no, definitely. Trust me, as I've learned this from my dad, I'm not saying this to you, I'm talking to the microphone right now, even though no one's actually there. I'm just going to say, you've taught me well on this, and the Mindspan goal setting principles are foolproof. No, well, I think they are. I think it's a really good way of doing it. So it's definitely something I would say to people to tune in for. So yeah, but thanks to everyone for listening, and thanks for your time, Dad, as well. And
always a pleasure.
We'll be back again in 2 weeks.
Look forward to that. Take care, everyone.
See you then. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of What's the Matter. My dad and I are going to be back again in another 2 weeks. If you haven't subscribed yet, but you want to stay up to date with what we're talking about, then please remember to do so. And in the meantime, have a good rest of your week.